John Robertson. John has a bachelor master's degree from Queen's University and over 27 years of assisting people to manage a variety of transition changes, crisis conflict, stress, relationships, career transitions, return to work, death, as well as various other topics. John is a certified trauma specialist with ATSS, an approved instructor in critical incident stress management with CCISF, and a certified grief counselor. Please welcome John Robertson in the shift approach.
So I just want to make sure you should all have a copy of the shift brochure because I don't want you worrying about taking notes. I just want to give you an overview, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to operate from a proactive point of view. Because what is happening in a lot, and I also do crisis response for EAP, so I can walk through how they work, and I'm a certified coach, so I can walk through a whole bunch of check marks. But what I want you to do is be mindful that it seems like a lot of things get going, and then in 2 to 5 years, they kind of fizzle, and it's like a new program comes out, but we've reshuffled the cards, and we call it a new title. And so what I want to do is I want to build upon what the doctor said, but also upon what Mr. Knowles has shared. And let's move from surviving to thriving. And if you want to read about some of these principles and practices, go look at psychological health and safety in the workplace. So Carver, a doctor, talks about the different responses to a critical event. So for example, there's a critical event, and what I need you to be mindful of is a crisis is never, ever, 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 ever the event. My wife and I were in well, it wasn't an MVC, but it was an MV spin, and she did, and I just kind of steered through it, and for me, it was a good moment because we ended up on our side of the road, and I said, next time, sweetheart, it would be better if you didn't do this. And she missed my point and picked up on 2 words. Next time. What do you mean, next time? A crisis is never, ever, ever the event. Please. So it could be job loss. It could be the death of a parent. It could be the death of a partner. It could be a critical event. And as we're dealing with different generations, our daughter is teaching Syrian Afghan refugees. Their definition of a critical event and the fight, flight, freeze, appease reaction of the brain, they described it through the Google Translator. They described it as a tank pointed at their face, a machine gun in their back. And Amanda was thinking, failing a test. Very different definitions of norm. And so there is the dysfunction, and then we move into the survival, and then we move into status quo. And resilience is based on the principle of returning to a new norm. You cannot go back to the old. But what is the definition of the new norm? And what I want to target is the thriving. Post-traumatic growth. And part and parcel of that is very simply building a teeter-totter. So when we talk about trust and communication, Mr. Knowles was speaking about this. Communication is never what is said, ever what is said. It is always what is heard. Always. And what we used to call critical incident stress management, psychological first aid, R2MR, manners, how a crisis gets handled actually dictates which way things are going to go. And you heard from some of the stories. And when we're talking about that fulcrum, that teeter-totter point, I want to focus on the resistance, the proactive factors, because most models are built on this model. In circus, in a fair, it's called whack-a-mole. For those of you who don't remember the circus or fair, it was a little round thing that popped up and you know, when a reaction shows up, and what you need to understand, please, is I was raised in a very strong Scottish home. That was a hug. If you're going to cry, I'll bloody well give you something to cry about. So when I'm sharing with you handling things in a positive or proactive behavior. And when we talk about those, majority of EAPs are seen as reactive. It is a tragedy because they have so many tools that can help proactively but don't get used. In order for this teeter-totter, resilience teeter-totter to work, it has to be supported by peers who are supported by mental health. It won't work in any other formula. So what I'd like you to be mindful of is a very simple theme. Run towards the roar. Is there anybody who has never seen the movie Lion King? You remember when the hyenas were doing their thing and Mufasa, Simba's dad, does his roar? And they all, actually one of my guys that I really like in that is, well, Mufasa, oh, say it again. Mufasa, oh, say it again. Sorry, I have a couple voices going on here and I'm just trying to find a focus through the middle. And one of the things that, it's called run towards the roar. And the way it works is as a lion ages, muscles start to fail, the teeth start to rot. All the lion has is his roar. And the way that the lion keeps his pride is his roar. And so when the younger lions try to challenge his leadership, he outroars them. But the way that the model works is if there's a herd of antelope, the lion will come in and will go to one side. All the other pride go towards the other side. And when the lion gets over here, the lion roars. Animal instinct is fight, flight, freeze, appease. So the majority of the animals run away from the roar. Humans are the only animal, or to go with yesterday's theme, humans are the only mammal that can run towards the roar. And that is why block training, use of force, over and over and over and over is done. That's the premise it's based on. So that you don't think like a normal human being, we can run towards the roar. The same principle applies in resilience. Run towards the roar. There are a lot of things to fear, folks. Pension. I don't know if I can afford retirement. I don't know if I'm going to make it to retirement. I don't know if my kids are going to work out. You know, all the things that we have to fear in life. And we can spend our lives running away from it. And what the doctor was describing with resilience is what I would teach you as the serenity prayer. And if you don't know what that is, talk to a member of AA, NA, GA. Change what I can, accept what I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. And when we're talking about the resilience teeter-totter, I want to spend the rest of this time talking to the proactive side. This is what we would call Groundhog Day. So, there is, whatever, there's a critical event, there's an awareness that people need to do something, we make a decision. About every 2 to 5 years, we do the same thing. Self-help gurus do the exact same things in book writing. If you don't believe me, go check the publishing date of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective. I'm aware, I read it, and I'm aware I need 7 habits to be highly effective. In about 2 to 5 years, I'm buying principle-centered leadership because I doesn't got the 7 habits. That model, what I want you to notice, please, is self-help. When I'm asking you to be thinking about resilience, I want you to be thinking, please, about sports. Because we need coaches. I got enough issues in my life. I don't need more experts sitting in the stands. Go to the ACC, or in my case in Ottawa, the Scotiabank place. Canadian Tire Center, whatever it's called. There's a hockey team that goes out, well, they go from skating. I can tell you where the best athletes are. They're the 20,000 sitting in the stands. Because they know exactly what the 12 on the ice should be doing. Guess what's happening in your world, folks? All the experts are on Facebook, or in the news, or where. And what I'm asking you to be, please be thinking about is make a commitment. Clarify an end zone. My sport was football. Clarify an end zone, a net, a hoop, a big green wall. What does success mean for you? What does resilience mean for you? And I'm going to keep looping back to this, but what I want you to notice is this is maturity, this is organizational health. And so when somebody gets a wallop, is there anybody in this room that has never experienced a Charlie horse? You know, you always get the expert that says, oh, it doesn't hurt, walk it off, you're fine. You know, that kind of helpful advice? Why is it we treat critical events and that type of stress any differently? Unfriend a tween from Facebook and you're going to see an emotional Charlie horse. Relational Charlie horse. Talk to somebody who's gone through a divorce. That was a divorce is a cross between a separation and a divorce. and what happens is, in these valleys of chaos, if we don't have our end zone, we have no way to get going through those valleys. And what ends up happening is we do the event awareness decision cycle, and hence why we hear people say all the time, oh, I took that course. I've been there, done that. Great, what did you do with it? Well, I took the course. Yeah, I heard that part. What did you do with it? I got a toolbox full of tools. Have you ever used them? And if we do not clarify some of those pieces, so one of the things that I've been working with is creating a psychological health and safety in the workplace, and it's by the Mental Health Commission of Canada. And what they're talking about are some of the factors that automatically impact this. Psychological support, leadership style, and some of the other pieces. So the shift approach, and why you have the brochure, and by the way, this is dark humor. Where this came from is when shift happens or needs to. Because there's two ways it happens. When it hits the fan or leadership. There is no other way that change will happen. And so what I want to do is just walk through some of those pieces. And this is how organizations will work. In about 2 to 5 years, they hit a wall and they do this Groundhog Day. And what we have to do is start implementing it from the value side to say, okay, what are we going to do? How is that going to work? And then basically discover, determine, develop, and deploy. You cannot hatch a healthy organization. It has to be grown and nurtured. So, Captain's Class is a book by Sam Walker, and he did a study of some great successful teams, and one of the things that he found was actually the exact opposite of what most people think. The teams that had consistent, successful records, the captains were actually not the best players. Very seldom were they ever the best media image. They were the behind-the-scene support type. In fact, one of the comments he makes is, and I go right back to what Mr. Knowles was sharing, they were renegades. They didn't follow the Canadian model, the lemmings. They thought differently. And so what I want you to be mindful of is a very simple definition of leadership. ACEs. It's the only card that can be the greatest by being the least. Authenticity. Basically, transparency. If you want to know what this is like, invite somebody to your supper table and let them see you. Commitment. Say and do. This impacts trust, by the way. What did you hear me commit to, and what are you expecting me to follow through with? And then enthusiasm. Now, passion is not, oh, you can do it, you know that Tony Robbins? Passion is, and I love the old Hebrew definition, it's the fire in the belly that you care about. And you ever notice that there are some people that, and he was talking about it perfectly. How are you doing today? Wow, just contain your enthusiasm just a touch. Passion. And I've heard it about me. This is about as excited as John gets. Okay, well, you know what? My passion. Now, we have a Tigger. If you're not familiar with Winnie the Pooh characters, go Google it. But we have a Winnie the Pooh for our son. His definition of passion, I tend to respond with, Chris, take a pill. Inspiring. You ever notice, and by the way, this always comes out in leadership, you ever notice there are some people that others will follow through hell, and they don't ever ask, will you follow me? There's something about them that we just love being around them. And then, of course, service, servanthood, whatever you want to call that S. Basically, this is defined in a very simple statement. Whatever it takes, or not my job. And that is the quickest barometer for a leader that will have anybody following them. Qualifying a shepherd, I call it the 6 C's of leadership. Character is what you are when nobody's watching. By the way, that always leaks out. Crisis works like a hot water, and we are like tea bags. If you want to find out what's important to a person, put them in hot water. Because what's inside always leaks out. Competence. Most of you will have some form of personal performance reviews. That was ours at Ottawa Police, PPR. Credibility. What's your reputation? What do people say about us when we're not around? And then, of course, countenance is the old English word. I like that because it's composure. But countenance has been mistranslated as I've got my crap all together. Countenance is, we will get through this. Admiral Stockdale calls it the Stockdale paradox. It's a belief that in the end we'll prevail. However, we got some brutal realities to get through. And he was a survivor of the POW, Vietnam. Chemistry. Was quoted Chris Lewis. Some people walk into the room, some people walk out of the room. The one that I heard, very similar, there's always 2 types of people that are glad to see. The people that we're glad to see and the people that we are glad to see go. Chemistry. And then courage. Courage is not doing the wrong things. Courage is a willingness to do the right things. It is a standing for something. It is not standing against this or that. And when we're talking about those pieces, that event awareness, think progress like gardening, not program. And let me show you how this works in real time. I'm a coward. My wife and I have 3 kids. I'm a coward. I asked my 3 kids when I was driving. So Carolyn's sitting here, 3 kids behind me. How would you describe your dad in a non-physical way? Number 1, our daughter, type A. You love your job. Number 2, I know that you love your work. Number 3, I know that you love what you do. Anything else? Crickets. And my wife, because she obviously has the gift of encouragement, looked at me while I was driving and said, "And is there anything else you need to ask?" That was my TSN turning point. I'm not going to be at my own funeral, but I will not go to my grave having my kids say, "Dad loved his job," and not be able to say anything else. How do people describe you non-physically? And if you've got enough guts and you don't have a teenager, borrow one. But if we don't like their answer, it's not their problem. Harness. If I had a quarter for every time I've been told some of this stuff, there's always 2 values in every organization. There's the the aspirational. If you want to see what they look like, there's the ones posted on the website, and there's the ones that everybody operates by. In this work, they have to line up. What's your motivation for dealing with mental health, psychological health state? What's your motivation for dealing with resilience? By the way, it is the #1 source of conflict when values diverge. So when we're talking about some of those kinds of things, if you want to know what your values are, by the way, look at your day timer and look at your bank statement. Where we spend our time and our money, those are your real values, and they will leak out. A fellow was working in an organization during the day. He had an evening job at a Home Depot type company, and he saw the CEO come in after they did one of those pep rally workplace things, and he gave the CEO too much change. And the CEO countered it, kept going, and he came back a little bit later, and he went to the cashier and he said, "You've given me too much change." And the guy said, "Oh, I know I did, but I heard your talk about our values as a company, and I just wanted to see if you live them." People are doing that to us every single day, folks. And it's never the big stuff, it's the little stuff. Always the little stuff. Intervention. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is the heart and soul of why we're here. But intervention is never the event. Change might actually be the crisis. And then, of course, it reveals the stone in the shoe issue. So a unit, a section that's not playing well together, when you put them in a hot situation, it's going to go from bad to ugly really quick. And one of the things that happens is how we handle that intervention is going to be really vital. Now, one of the problems that we have in our family is one of our core values, the rules of engagement in our house, is to be honest, tell the truth. One day, we were in a boat. We have a little outboard, not little. We can ski in two behind it, but it's not the boat I wanted. I was flying. And I digress. And the two boys are sitting here, Mom's here, and I'm driving. And one of them says, "Dad, you seem really quiet." And I got one of those calls that took me on a tangent. And I started to share what I was thinking about, and then they stopped listening. And because I'm a mature male, I went quiet. I didn't quite do the lip pout, but I was pretty close. And one of our sons, "What's the matter with you, Dad?" "Nothing." And my wife completely not only threw me under the bus, she drove the bus. And she said, "Oh, your father gets like this when he gets his feelings hurt. He'll get over it." Wow, thank you, sweetheart. And folks, you need to understand, I was raised in a home where if something like that had been alluded to, the anchor would have been wrapped around both ankles and over the side. As we get near the dock, my son, Tigger, leans forward and says, "Hey, Dad, can I get the truck keys? I'll go get the truck and trailer while you're busy sorting yourself out." We busted out laughing. And you know what humor does when you're in crisis? Good humor, not put down sarcasm, but good humor. And then we talk on focus. Simple little thing here is to find a norm. And a norm, just like that graduation, maturity, moving the ball down the field, we have to keep redefining the norm. What was my norm BC, before children, is no longer my norm. What's success mean for you? You know, I'm one of those jerks that if you have the bumper sticker that says the one with the most toys wins, I'm the one that will tap your door and say, "Wins what?" Hearses don't have luggage racks. And where there's a will, there's relatives. Wins what? What does success mean in the workplace, folks? You and I are not going to be able to keep everybody healthy. But what does it mean to create an environment where health can be reestablished? let me show you how this works. Just take a moment at your table and say, I want you to think of one word. And quickly name a couple words that come to your mind. Change. When you hear the word change, what comes to your mind? At your tables, please. Okay, I'll ask you to just come back. What are some words that come to mind at your table? Quickly, please. Others.
Life.
Life. Resistance.
Inevitable.
Inevitable.
Stress.
Stress.
Excitement.
Excitement.
Different.
Different. Opportunity.
Being ready.
Sorry,
Being ready.
being ready.
Change.
I'm going to quote a wise man because once you get to a certain age, your hearing isn't as good as it used to be. So, other.
Can't say, but it starts with an F.
John, I find that hard to believe that you would struggle saying anything.
Diversity.
I heard male voice.
Diversity.
Others.
Perception.
Sorry,
Perception.
perception.
Fear or progress.
Fear or progress. What I want you to do, folks, is I want you to pick on that one word. So imagine what happens if we're not clear, and this is communication, not what's said, but what's heard. If we're talking about one word, change, and we have all these different translations of it. So what does resilience mean? All the different translations. What does leadership mean? All these different translations. What we have to start doing, especially in English, we have to start teaching people what does it mean for us, and then what does it mean for you. And that is where we will find our unity. Our unity will not be found in what the big picture stuff. It's what does that mean for you? What does that look like for you? How will it work for you? And that's why the last bullet here is so important. All games have to have a goal or an end zone to play well. And think about it. If you are playing a sport that you do not enjoy, any game, any hit rather, takes us out of the game. I can apply it to school, folks. I won't expose you guys, but there will be some people in this room who absolutely love school. There are others of you, yeah, not so much. When we get that F or D or whatever mark, that hit, if we're taking a course that we really don't enjoy, that hit can actually take us out of the game. Guess what happens in life, folks? So are you playing your game in a way that works for you? That's why the cut and paste model of training won't work. If my wife was like me, I'd really dislike her. And as several people have said, John, bring Carolyn. Everybody loves her. What position are you playing? And that goes to the next one, the team. And there is numerous examples, but what I want you to do is, instead of doing team building and all these other things, think like a body. And yes, I'm going to put it on the table. You know what happens when the sphincter doesn't work properly. You know, if you want to Google this, go Google the poster, Who's the Boss? And it was all the body parts fighting, and the one body part says, fine, I want to be the boss. And it closed up. And the eyes went wobbly, fuzzy, whatever. Okay? But what I want you to do is, what's your role in the organization? Please, please don't try and be all the different roles. There are some of you that absolutely are wonderful, wonderful mercy people. People will tell you their story, and all you have to do is say, hi. Others of you, let me find somebody who can help and listen. Some of you are wonderful administrators. Folks, we wouldn't be here with this level of standard if there wasn't great organization and admin at the helm. It's not going to work. Somebody needs to remind people of where we're trying to move the ball. Other people need to move down the field. Other people encourage. Other people train. But think like a body. Because what that means is, instead of doing Groundhog Day, we actually start to move forward. And I want to make this in a real, tangible way. Kyle was coming home from school, and Kyle was one of those kinds of classic, nerdy type kids. He had glasses, and he was thin, and just classic picture of a nerd. And he was coming home one Friday, and he was carrying all his school books. And Tommy saw him kind of across the front yard of the school, and he, what a nerd, look at him carrying he's probably going to study all weekend, what a geek. And he just goes on, and then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 of those types of people come towards Kyle and hit him, and his books go all over the place, and his glasses go flying off. Tommy sees this happen, and he goes over to Kyle, and he says, I know those guys. They're jerks. Don't worry about them. Here, let me help you. And he picks up his glasses, and he gives them back to Kyle, and he starts to pick up the books. And he's walking with Kyle, and they start talking, and Kyle shares that he was at a private school. This is his first year in grade 9, and he's having a really tough time, but he'll get through it. We're good. As they continue home, Tommy realizes that Kyle lives very close to him. So they walk most of the way home, and Tommy's thinking about the party Friday night, and tomorrow on Saturday they're going to do the big football game, and somebody comes over to Tommy and he says, hey, do you want to get together tomorrow and play football? Kyle says, well, not very good. Yeah, none of us are. You want to hang out? Just do it? Okay. They get to Kyle's house, and Kyle says, would you like to come in? We're just having pizza. Would you like to come in and have a bite? Sure. Let me call my mom. So they go in, they hang out, they play their games all Friday night. Tommy heads home the next day, they get together and play football. They spent most of the weekend together. On Monday morning, Kyle is going back to school, carrying all his books again, and Tommy harasses him and says, buddy, if you're carrying all your workbooks back and forth every weekend, you are going to get in some kind of condition. Here, give me some of your books. 4 years later, Tommy and Kyle have become best friends, and they're graduating grade 12. In fact, Kyle had become the school's perfect poster child. Yes, he still had glasses, but he filled out. He was a good-looking kid. He was doing well in school. The girls loved him. He was everybody's kind of role model. So they chose him to be the valedictorian. Tommy was celebrating, and he said, man, I know you're going to do well in this speech. I'm so glad it's not me. Kyle gets up in a valedictorian speech, and he says, this is one of those opportunities where we have to thank those people who have helped us along the path. Our coaches, our teachers, and our friends. And he blew the audience away when he said, because years ago, when I left the private school and started attending this high school, I came home one Friday night and I brought all my books home because I didn't want my mom to have to clean out my locker because I was going to commit suicide that weekend. And one person stopped, hung out with me, and Tommy looked with absolute shock. And Kyle's two parents looked at Tommy and just smiled. When you think about being a team member, please don't think about big stuff. Think about the little stuff. Helping somebody carry their particular suitcase, their books. Leadership is never a position. It's about influence. And what you don't know about me is I tend to be somewhat task-oriented. And Renee said, can you talk quick and get us back on time?
Oh my God.
1 minute. Just as there's a couple extra brochures